Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we will be talking about what is it actually like to work for a top-tier tech company. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is Zia. I'm a software engineer at Twitter, and I talk about software engineering, tech interviews, and technologies in general. Let's get into it. So for a lot of people, it's not very clear what working at a top-tier tech company really is. Today's video, I want to talk more in depth about several things. 1, work-life balance. 2, compensation. 3, day-to-day. 4, what are the challenges of working in a top-tier tech company? And if you're interested to learn more about how I landed my job at Twitter, you can check out the link right here for my video. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's talk about work-life balance at a top-tier tech company. First of all, I believe it generally depends on the culture of the company. In the US, for example, Silicon Valley, Seattle, all the sort of the tech hub in the US, people generally stick to a 9 to 5 schedule. So you can get to the office around 9 o'clock in the morning and you kind of generally check out around 5 o'clock in the evening. And of course, some people might kind of change their schedule a little bit to fit in with their lifestyle. So I think that's one of the beauties of being a software engineer, in which you can adapt your schedule pretty flexibly because there's not as much of an expectation for you to be right in the office around 9. But of course, that depends on the company and the culture there as well. But generally, people stick to a 9 to 5. It's not very different from any other work in any other industry. So there is one thing that hasn't been talked about much, especially when it comes to work-life balance here, which is on-call. So on-call is essentially the idea that employees have to work unpredictable work schedules in order to make sure the systems, the processes, everything is working and functioning as usual. For example, if you work for a top-tier company and you're responsible for maintaining the system that shows ads on YouTube, for example, the expectation there is that employees generally have to take on-call maybe either once a month or once a quarter, depending on the size of the team, because it's generally distributed evenly around all the team members within that team. So what that means is if you're assigned as the on-call for the first week of Christmas week, for example, then that means you generally have to stick to your phone and your computer at all times during that week. Because if anything happens to the system that serves ads on YouTube, it is your responsibility to react and respond to it as soon as possible. It's not required to fix it right away, depending on the severity of it or if you have any context of what the issue is, but it is your responsibility as on-call to get to it and make sure at least someone is looking at that issue. That could be a problem for a lot of people who are planning their holidays, right? For example, they're visiting their parents or visiting their friends and family over vacations, and when you're on-call, you generally don't have the flexibility of, just letting go, letting your hair back and enjoying the company of your friends, enjoying the company of your family, because you're always thinking in the back of your mind, what if something had gone wrong, and you have to kind of take time out of that and get back to work. I think that's one of the things that impacts work-life balance quite a bit, and I've seen a lot of engineers who actually decided to leave top-tier tech companies because of the hectic on-call schedule. Generally, there are no expectations for employees to stay after 5 p.m. There are exceptions to the case, of course, especially when you're trying to roll out a new feature or when you're trying to put out fires, or some situations where you might have to kind of put in some extra hours or stay back just to kind of get that thing done. But I don't think there is expectation for people to do that. Generally, what I've seen there are people who willingly step up to the occasion, own that outcome. So that's the first thing about work-life balance. Moving on. So the second thing is compensation for software engineers in top-tier tech companies. Back in the day when I started out as a software engineer, it wasn't very clear exactly how much software engineers were being paid. You were seeing numbers thrown all over the place. Some people were making $50,000 a year, some people were making $100,000 a year, some people were making $300,000 a year. It was sort of this very opaque section, and it's sort of seen as a taboo at the time because you don't generally see people talking about that. I think in a day-to-day conversation, if you're talking to someone as a software engineer, I think it's kind of rude to kind of ask them up front, hey, how much do you make? How much do you make? Trying to turn that into a conversation is generally quite awkward. Thanks to a recent rise in websites like levels.fyi, Blind, compensation has actually been more transparent in the past few years, and you can actually log on now to see what are the different it won't give you the exact number per se, but it will give you a sort of a range of what you should expect for your level for a specific company or specific industry, how much you should make as a software engineer. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what you would make as a software engineer, there are different levels as a software engineer. Generally, the ranking for software engineers start at, you have entry-level software engineer, either as a new grad or a master's, and you move on to the next level, which is software engineer 2. So you might have 2 to 3 years of experience, or you might be a PhD student who just graduated and getting into the industry for the first time. And then moving on, you have a senior software engineer. Beyond that, you have staff or / principal level, senior staff, and so on and so forth. But generally, people, when they talk about software engineers in the industry, they're talking about either one of those 3 levels, software engineer 1, 2, or senior software engineer. So let's talk about the 3 components that make up compensation as a software engineer. So first thing, you have your salary. So that is essentially what you're being paid every single month to keep your job. So that is fixed. The second component here is what is called RSU, or restricted stock units. Generally, companies like Facebook and Google that are publicly listed, they would offer restricted stock units to the employees as a way of compensating them for their work. Also motivates the employees to tie their interests to the performance of the company as well. And the third component there is your signing bonus. So when you sign or when you join a new company, they will offer you a one-time payment, which is called a signing bonus, that is tied into your compensation as well. So with that said, those are the 3 components. In general, for a software engineer 1, your base salary could range from $80,000 to $120,000 or maybe even like $130,000 per year. And the second component there, which is RSUs, depending on the size of the company, they're generally offered over a period of 4 years. Generally, that could range from $150,000, $300,000, $400,000. I say that it's actually quite a wide band right there, because it depends generally at what stage your company is at. So I will save that for a later video, but today let's just assume that you're working for a publicly listed top-tier tech company, and they would offer around $200,000, maybe $300,000 spread over 4 years. And the signing bonus can range also, because it's very dependable on what levels you're at, and it depends quite a little bit, unfortunately, on your actual negotiation skills. I've seen people negotiate a big signing bonus, maybe like $50,000, $60,000, and I've also seen people actually not getting any signing bonus when they join a new company. So it generally depends, but I hope that gives you a good idea of what compensation looks like for a software engineer at a top-tier tech company. In general, here are some of the challenges that I've seen working as a software engineer at a top-tier tech company. The first thing is learning new technologies. Because of the nature of the industry itself, there are a lot of new things that come by that you have to pick up. Kafka, Go, Hadoop, right? There are a lot of new technologies that pop up every now and then. It's actually quite a challenge to stay up to date with all the new technologies that are coming up. Is it required to stay up to date with all the new technologies? I'd argue probably not, right? Because a lot of the concepts behind all these new technologies are actually quite similar, but the syntax could be different. The guarantees for certain technologies might be different. The premise of the technology could be different as well. But in general, trying to stay up to date with all these different technologies requires a lot of active investment into learning. So I would recommend, if you're a software engineer, then definitely spend time to learn and stay up to date with all the new technologies that are coming up in the industry today. So that's one challenge, which is trying to stay up to date with technologies. So the second challenge that I see there is, how do you navigate your growth as an individual contributor? So in the industry, an individual contributor is essentially a software engineer, where you're writing code and you're not, doing people management, you're not planning, you're not coming up with a vision for the product in the future. You're just a software engineer writing code. In general, trying to navigate that growth throughout your career is actually not that straightforward, because after it goes to a certain level, it becomes very ambiguous what you're supposed to do in order to get to the next level. Does it mean you have to write more code? Does it mean you have to come up with a new framework? Or does it mean you have to develop a new programming language in order to get to the next level? I've talked to a lot of different people and they have different perspectives on this, but in general, I don't think there's a clear consensus of what it should be in order to grow to the next level. When you're starting out as a software engineer, it might be really clear from SDE1, what do you need to do to get to the next levels, and SDE2, you might be, you have to own the feature, you have to be able to develop and ship code that is bug-free. That might be all the requirements you need to get to the next level. But going from the second level to being a senior software engineer, that might not be as clear. And from a senior to the next level, that's even more unclear. Right? So I think that's one challenge that hasn't been talked about as much in the industry. And that's the second challenge that I see being as a software engineer. And the fourth thing is, what is it like in the day-to-day for a software engineer? Most of the time, in terms of my time breakdown, I would say I'm doing about 50 to 60% time of that in coding, maybe around 30%, 40% of that time in doing design reviews, code reviews, one-on-one meetings, and another 10% of that might be doing some planning work. So I would be what you would consider an individual contributor, right? I'm spending majority of my time writing code, doing design reviews, doing system designs for features or components. And that might change or differ depending on what sort of work that you're doing. If you're a tech lead, for example, if you are a architect, for example, or if you are a senior software engineer, that breakdown of time might change quite significantly from one person to the other. But in general, individual contributors would spend most of their time actually doing code. That is the general layout of how I would spend my time day to day. So I might get to work at 9 in the morning. I spent maybe an hour, going through my emails, checking and make sure that I answer to all the questions that are sent out my way. I generally kind of bash them together so I can get through all the emails in one go. So generally around 10 a.m. I would then go to grab breakfast, sit at my desk, and continue to do some planning for the rest of the day. I try to lay out maybe several things that I would plan to tackle. And then from 10 to 11:30, I would do some deep work. So try to focus on what I'm supposed to do for the day, continue any programming work that I was supposed to continue from that I left off from yesterday. And then at 11:30, we would have a stand-up where the team gets together and we report on what is the updates, what are we focusing on for today, what are we blocked on if there's any, and what is our main focus for the rest of the day. And then at 12 we get lunch. So generally it's from 12 to 1 p.m. All the team members get lunch together. We have an on-site cafeteria where the food's prepared for us every single day. So it saves us time. We don't have to go to food truck, whatever, and kind of buy our food out there. So I think it's a huge time saver, and it makes life a lot easier for us as well. And then from 1 p.m. to about 2 or 3 p.m. I would again go back to coding, focus on my system designs, component designs, features, and stuff like that. And then generally from 3 to 5 p.m. I would try to schedule a bunch of meetings in there if I have to. It's generally not the same every single day because for Tuesday and Thursday, for example, I try to keep that as meeting free as possible so I can focus on the work I need to do. But generally from 3 to 5 p.m. that's where I schedule my meetings, either reviews or one-on-ones with my manager, with my PM, with my tech lead, for example, to figure out, okay, what are the complications, what are some blockers, what is the planning for future work. And then at 5, I would jump on the bus and get back home. So generally, that's what my work schedule looks like from 9 to 5 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then I would also have one day where I work from home because of the commute from where I live to Seattle. Generally, I try to keep one day where I'm staying at home and I can spend time with my family. I hope that was helpful for you to understand what is it actually like working for a top-tier tech company. If you enjoyed that, leave a like, a subscribe, and hit that bell button. All right, take care. See ya.